Hey everyone, Lee here from the 3D Modeler. Welcome back. In part 4 of our Victorian Facade series in 3ds Max, we started modeling the segmented arched windows. Now, in part 5, we will continue adding architectural elements which will bring us closer to the full elegance of our facade. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now we are in 3ds Max and let's start by creating the pilasters of the segmented arched windows. And I will begin by modeling the shaft of the pilaster. So let's select the dado cornice trim, press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press T to switch to the top view. From shape step, let's enable the rectangle tool. Let's also enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S. And let's create a rectangular spline by snapping it to the corners of what looks like the base molding of the pilaster. Now, let's exit the isolation mode by clicking on this icon here in the status bar. Let's switch to the front view. From the modify panel, let's apply a shell modifier to our rectangular spline. Let's adjust the outer amount to something like 20. Then let's apply an editable poly modifier to it. Let's zoom in on our shaft using the zoom region tool. Let's enable the vertex editing mode, select these group of vertices, and let's adjust the height of our shaft to be the same as the one in our reference image, like this. Now let's create the panel molding of the shaft. And to do so, I will start by creating the recessed area. So let's jump to the perspective view by pressing shortcut P. And let's enable the polygon editing mode. Let's select this polygon, right click and insert. The amount of insertion will be 4 centimeters. Press OK. Now we want to extrude it inward. So right with our polygon selected, right click and extrude. The amount of extrusion will be -2 centimeters, like this. Now we have finished creating the recessed area. Let's change the color of the shaft to the yellow color, like this. Let's switch to the front view and let's create the 2D shape of our panel molding. So let's enable the rectangle tool and let's also enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S. And let's create a rectangular spline by snapping it to the borders of the recessed area, like this. Let's zoom out and let's unhide our custom profile. So let's open our layer explorer by clicking on its icon here in the toolbar. Let's click on the eye icon next to the profiles layer to unhide it. Then let's close our layer explorer and with our 2D shape selected from the modify panel, let's apply a bevel profile modifier to it. Under parameters, choose classic and let's pick profile 1. Let's zoom in using shortcut Z. As you can see, we still need to make some adjustments, so let's activate the bevel profile modifier gizmo by pressing shortcut 1 and let's rotate it 180 degrees around the Z-axis, like this. Let's jump to the perspective view. Let's change the color of the panel molding to the yellow color. And as you can see, now we have finished creating the shaft and its recessed panel molding. Back to the front view. Now let's create the capital of the pilaster. But first let's select our reference image, press Alt plus Q to isolate it. Let's zoom in on the capital using the zoom region tool. As you can see, we'll divide the capital into 2 main elements, the base element and ornamental element. Let's create the base element. I will start by creating a rough spline which will roughly trace the outline of the capital. And to do so, from the shape step, let's enable the line tool and let's roughly trace the outline of the capital. As you can see, I have finished roughly tracing the outline of the capital from this corner. However, we are missing some detailed information at the bottom. To fill this gap, we will mirror our rough spline in the x-axis to trace the bottom details from the corresponding corner. So, with our rough spline selected, let's enable the mirror tool by clicking on its icon here in the toolbar. We will mirror our rough spline in the x-axis with no clone. Press OK. Now let's adjust the position of our spline to the corresponding corner, like this. Now let's enable the vertex editing mode by pressing shortcut 1, and let's add these missing details. Now we have finished creating our rough profile. I will refine it off camera and I will be right back with our refined custom profile. By the way, if you would like to learn about the spline editing techniques we use to refine our rough spline, feel free to check out part 2 of our series. I have left the link for you in the description below. We are back with our refined custom profile. Now let's create the 2D shape for the base element. And to do so, let's select our shaft, press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press T to switch to the top view. Now let's enable the line tool and let's create our 2D shape by snapping the line to the corners of the top surface of the shaft, like this. Now let's exit the isolation mode. From the modify panel, let's apply a bevel profile modifier to our 2D shape. Under parameters, choose classic. And let's pick our custom profile. Let's zoom in using the zoom region tool. As you can see, we need to make some adjustments. So let's select our custom profile, press 1 to enable the vertex editing mode. And as you can see, I want to change the location of the first vertex from this vertex to this vertex. So let's select this vertex, right click and make first. And as you can see, now let's switch to the perspective view by pressing shortcut P. Let's change the color of the base element to the yellow color. And now we have finished creating the base element of the capital. Back to the front view. Now let's create the ornamental element of the capital. And as you can see, I have already imported the ornamental object that I will be using to create the ornamental element. But first, with our object selected from the utilities panel, let's reset the Xform of our object. Then right click and convert to editor poly. By doing so, I am preventing any modeling issues down the line. Now, I want our ornamental element to be constrained to this flat area. And to do so, let's adjust the position of our ornamental object like this. Now let's switch to the uniform scale tool by pressing shortcut R and let's scale it down until it fits within this area. Like this. Now let's jump to the perspective view by pressing shortcut P and let's adjust the position of our object in the y-axis like this. Now let's create the ornamental corner element, and I will do so by using the symmetry modifier. But first, hold shift and drag our ornamental object to make a copy. Press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press T to switch to the top view. Now let's apply a symmetry modifier to our object. And let's activate the symmetry gizmo by pressing shortcut 1. And let's rotate it 45 degrees around the axis. As you can see, I need to flip the symmetry modifier, and now let's rotate it 45 degrees around the z-axis. Let's jump to the perspective view. I think we need to close this gap, so let's switch to the move tool by pressing shortcut W, and let's move it a little bit like this to close this gap. And as you can see, now we have finished creating our ornamental corner element. Let's exit the isolation mode and back to the front view. Now let's adjust the position of our corner element. So select both of them, our corner element and the base element. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them. Press T to switch to the top view. Now let's select our corner element and let's adjust the position of its gizmo. So from the hierarchy panel, affect pivot only, and let's snap its gizmo to this corner like this. Now let's deactivate the gizmo and let's adjust the position of our ornamental corner like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, now our corner element is in place. Let's exit the isolation mode. And to make sure that all our ornamental objects will have the same depth, hold shift and drag our corner element to make a copy. Then from the modify panel, let's delete the symmetry modifier. Now we are sure that all the ornamental objects will have the same depth. Now let's select our old ornamental object, press delete to delete it. Now let's select our corner element, hold shift and drag to make a copy. Now let's mirror it in the x-axis with no clone, press OK. Now let's place it at the corresponding corner. So let's select our object and base element, press Alt plus Q to isolate them, press T to switch to the top view. Now let's select our new corner element and let's snap it to the corresponding corner like this. Now back to the front view and let's exit the isolation mode. Now let's fill the gap between the two corner elements. And to do so, we'll use our ornamental object, but first let's zoom in using the zoom region tool, and let's adjust the position of this ornamental object like this. Now hold shift and drag to make a copy. We will make 4 copies. Press OK. Now I want to fill this gap, and to do so I will use a 2x2x2 FFD modifier. So let's select all our ornamental objects. From the modifier panel, let's apply a 2x2x2 FFD modifier to them. Now let's activate the control points and let's select these points and adjust their position like this. I will also select these points and adjust their position a little bit like this. Now let's zoom out, and as you can see, now we have finished filling the gap between our two corner elements. Now let's jump to the perspective view. As you can see, we still need to fill the sides of the capital. And to do so, let's select one of our ornamental object, hold shift and drag to make a copy. Then right click and convert to editable poly. Let's rotate it 90 degrees around the Z axis like this. Now let's select it and the base element and the corner element. Press Alt plus key to isolate them. Press T to switch to the top view. Now let's select our new ornamental object and let's adjust its position like this. Let's zoom in and let's constrain the movement to the X direction, and let's snap the back of our ornamental object with the back of our corner element like this. Now let's switch to the left view and let's adjust the position of the ornamental object like this. Hold shift and drag to make a copy, and we will make 2 copies. Press OK. As you can see, now we have finished filling this side. Let's select all our copies. Hold shift and drag in the x-axis to make a copy. Now let's use the mirror tool to mirror them in the x-axis. Now let's also select the base element. Let's exit the isolation mode and let's also select this corner element. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them. Press T to switch to top view. Now let's select these group of ornamental objects, adjust their position like this, enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S, and let's snap the back of our copy with the back of our corner element like this. Let's exit the isolation mode, and as you can see, now we have finished creating the ornamental element of the capital. Back to the front view. Before wrapping up the capital of the pilaster, I need to make some minor adjustment to the base element of the capital. I don't like the shape of the cornice at this area. And since we are working in a non-destructive workflow, we can make this minor adjustment without messing up our work. So let's select our custom profile, press Z to zoom in the modify panel, let's apply an editable spline modifier to our profile. And now let's press 1 to enable the vertex editing mode. Now let's select this group of vertices, right click and convert to corner vertices. Now let's select this vertex, adjust its position, select this one, press delete to delete it. Then select this vertex, adjust its position. Select these two vertices, adjust their position like this. Then this group of vertices, adjust its position slightly like this. Now let's select this vertex, right click and convert to busy corner. Constrain the movement to the XY plane. Then let's adjust this busy handle like this. Now let's enable the fillet tool and let's round out this corner and this corner. Now let's select this group of vertices, adjust its position a little bit like this. I will also select this group of vertices and adjust its position like this, and also this group of vertices, and I will adjust their position like this. Now let's check before and after. This is before and this is after, and I'm totally satisfied with the final version. And this is the advantage of using a non-destructive workflow. Now let's zoom out, and as you can see from our reference image, we still have an extension over the pilaster. Consists of a smaller shaft and a smaller capital. So let's start by creating the smaller shaft. Now let's zoom in using the zoom region tool. And let's create a new rectangle spline. So from shape step, let's enable the rectangle tool and let's create a new rectangle spline. I will go with dimension 7 for the length and 18 for the width. Now let's rotate it 90 degrees around the x-axis. Then let's enable the align tool and let's align our rectangle spline with the base element. We will align the center of our rectangle spline with the center of our base element in the X, Y, Z direction. Press OK. And let's enable the snap tool and let's snap it to the top of our base element. Now let's select our rectangle spline and the base element. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them. Press T to switch to the top view. Now let's select our rectangle spline and constrain the movement to the Y axis or the Y direction, and then let's snap the back of our spline with the back of our base element. Now let's exit the isolation mode and let's apply a shell modifier to our rectangular spline. Then let's apply an editable poly modifier to it. Let's enable the vertex editing mode and let's select this group of vertices and let's adjust their position to adjust the height of our shaft to be the same as the one in our reference image, like this. Now let's create the recessed panel molding, and to do so let's jump to the perspective view and let's enable the polygon editing mode. Let's select this polygon, right click and insert. The amount of insertion will be 4 centimeters. Press OK. Now let's extrude it inwards, so right click extrude and the amount of extrusion will be -2 centimeters. Now we have finished creating the recessed area. Let's switch to the front view and let's create the 2D shape for the panel molding. So let's enable the rectangle tool from the shape step and let's create a new rectangle spline which covers the border of the recessed area like this. Now let's zoom out and let's apply a bevel profile modifier to our 2D shape. Under parameters, choose classic, then let's pick profile 1. Let's zoom in. As you can see, we still need to make some adjustments, so let's enable the bevel profile modifier gizmo by pressing shortcut 1 and let's rotate it 180 degrees around the z-axis like this. Let's switch to the perspective view. Let's select both the paneling and the shaft, and let's change their color to the yellow color like this. And now, as you can see, we have finished creating the shaft with the panel molding. Let's also close this opening at the top of the base element of the capital. So let's select our base element and let's apply a new editable poly modifier to it. Let's enable the edge editing mode and let's select this edge and this edge, and let's use the bridge tool and the ribbon. And as you can see, now we have closed the opening in the base element of the capital. Now let's switch to the front view by pressing shortcut F, and let's create the 2D shape for the base element of the small capital. And to do so, let's select the small shaft, press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press T to switch to the top view. Now let's enable the line tool from the shapes tab, and let's create our 2D shape by snapping the line to the corners of the shaft like this. Now let's exit the isolation mode by clicking on this icon here in the status bar. Since I have already created the custom profile for the base element of the small capital, we will apply it to our 2D shape using a bevel profile modifier. But first, let's zoom in on it. As you can see, it is a very simple custom profile. Let's zoom out. So with our 2D shape selected, let's apply a bevel profile modifier to it. Under parameters, choose classic, and let's pick our custom profile. Now let's zoom in using shortcut Z. As you can see, we still need to make some adjustment. So let's activate the bevel profile modifier gizmo by pressing shortcut 1, and let's rotate it 180 degrees around the y-axis like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view. And as you can see, by applying our custom profile to our 2D shape, we have finished creating the base element of the small capital. Back to the front view and let's zoom out. Now let's apply the ornamental element to the base element of the small capital. I will be using the same ornamental element we used to create the left and the right pilasters. So let's select this pilaster group. Then from the group menu, choose open. Let's select our ornamental element, hold shift and drag to make a copy. Then from the group menu, choose detach to detach the copy from the group. Now let's prepare our base element for applying the ornamental element. So let's select our base element, press Z to zoom in. From the modify panel, let's apply a new editable poly modifier to it. Let's enable the edge editing mode and let's select this group of ring edges, right click and connect to connect them in the center. Let's zoom out and let's select our ornamental element and let's delete all the symmetry modifier to start from scratch. Now let's disable the edged faces mode by pressing shortcut F4. Then let's adjust the position of our ornamental element and snap it to the center of our base element. Now let's zoom in using the Z shortcut. Let's switch to the uniform scale tool by pressing shortcut R and let's scale it down like this. We can also non-uniform scale it in the x-axis just to bring some of the floater element inward like this. Just some minor tweaking and we are done. Now let's jump to the perspective view by pressing shortcut P and let's switch to the move tool and let's adjust the position of our ornamental element in the y-axis like this. As you can see, there is some interference between the ornamental details and this cornice molding. So let's select this cornice molding and our ornamental element. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them and press L to jump to the left view. And now let's select our ornamental element and let's select our FFD modifier to activate it and let's activate the control points. Now let's select this group of points and let's adjust the position slightly in the x-axis like this. Now let's jump to the perspective view, and as you can see, we still have some minor interference. So let's switch back to the left view and let's activate the control points again, and let's adjust their position a little bit like this. Now let's jump back into the perspective view, and as you can see, now we have no interference between our ornamental element and the cornice molding. Back to the front view, and let's exit the isolation mode. Now let's wrap our ornamental element around the base element, and we will do so by using the symmetry modifier. But before doing so, we need to create a center vertex which will act as a helper for our symmetry modifier, to which we will snap the gizmo of our symmetry modifier to for precise wrapping of our ornamental element around the base element. So let's create this center vertex, and to do so, let's select our base element, press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press T to switch to top view, press Z to zoom in. Now let's enable the rectangle tool from the shapes tab, and let's also enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S. Now let's create a rectangular spline which snaps to the border of the top of our base element like this. Now double click on the width, then right click, copy, then double click on the lens to select it, right click, paste. Now let's adjust the position of our rectangular spline like this. Right click and convert to editable poly. Now let's enable the edge editing mode by pressing shortcut 2, and let's select these two edges. Right click, connect to connect them in the center. Then let's select this group of ring edges, right click and connect. Now we have created the center vertex. Now let's exit the isolation mode. Let's select our ornamental element and our base element. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them, press T to switch to top view, and Z to zoom out. Now we are ready to apply the symmetry modifier to our ornamental element. So let's select our ornamental element. From the modify panel, let's apply a symmetry modifier to it. Now let's activate the symmetry modifier gizmo by pressing shortcut 1, and let's snap it to our center vertex. Let's switch to the rotate tool, and let's rotate it 45 degrees around the z-axis. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, a total failure. And this is because we haven't reset the Xform of our object before applying the symmetry modifier. Since we have multiple times scaled our object, it messed up the original transforms. And this is a live demonstration for not resetting the Xform of your object before applying the symmetry modifier. So let's switch back to the top view, and let's delete the symmetry modifier. And with our ornamental element selected from the utilities panel, let's reset the Xform of our object. Now back to the modify panel, and let's apply a symmetry modifier to our object again, and let's activate the symmetry modifier gizmo by pressing shortcut 1, and let's snap it to the center vertex. Let's rotate it 45 degrees around the z-axis like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, a total success. We have perfectly wrapped our ornamental element around the base element. Now let's switch back to the top view, and let's apply another symmetry modifier to our object, and let's flip the mirror axis. Now let's jump back to the perspective view, and as you can see, we have perfectly wrapped our ornamental element around the base element. Now let's refine our ornamental element by removing the back extension for a cleaner look. And to do so, we will use the slice tool. So let's select our ornamental element, and let's apply a new editable poly modifier to it. Let's enable the edge editing mode, and let's scroll down and enable the slice tool. I will also enable the split option. Now let's jump to the left view, and let's rotate our slice plane 90 degrees around the z-axis. Now let's adjust its position and snap it to the back of our base element. Now click slice. Next, let's jump to the element editing mode by pressing shortcut 5, and let's select this element, press delete. Let's jump to perspective view, and as you can see, now we have refined our ornamental element, and by doing so, we have finished creating the small capital. Now we have finished creating the pilasters of the segmented arched windows, and I have already grouped each one of them into a single group. Now let's select both of them, hold shift and drag to make a copy, and now let's align them with their position in the reference guide, like this. Now let's jump to the perspective view. And as you can see, we need to extend this side of the dado molding to align with the back of the shaft. And to do so, let's open the dado group from group, choose open, and let's select the cornice trim, and from the modify panel, let's activate the line layer, and let's enable the vertex editing mode. Now let's select this vertex and let's snap it to the back of the shaft, like this. Now let's select the dado molding and let's enable the edge editing mode, and let's double click on this edge to select this edge loop. Now let's snap it to the back of the shaft like this. And now, as you can see, we have finished extending the side of the dado to align with the back of the shaft. Back to the front view. As you can see from our reference image, this pilaster will be mirrored on this side and this side, but we will only see half of the pilaster and with no panel molding. And to do so, let's select our pilaster, hold shift and drag to make a copy. Now, press Alt plus Q to isolate it and press P to switch to the perspective view. Now, let's open the pilaster group from group, choose open. Let's select the panel molding, press delete to delete it. Then let's select the shaft. From the modify panel, let's delete this editable poly layer and let's apply a new editable poly modifier to it. Now let's enable the polygon editing mode. Let's select this polygon and let's snap it to the bottom of the crown, like this. Now let's close the group of the pilaster, switch to front view, and let's exit the isolation mode. Now let's align our new pilaster with its position in the reference guide, like this. Now let's extend the shaft of the new pilaster to align with the bottom of the facade. So let's select our new pilaster from group, choose open. Then let's select the shaft, enable vertex editing mode. Then let's select this group of vertices and snap it to the bottom of the facade. Now let's close the group from group, choose close. And as you can see, now we have to make some adjustment. First, let's remove the hidden half of the pilaster, and I will do so using the slice modifier. So let's select our pilaster, press Alt plus Q to isolate it, press Z to zoom in, press F4 to disable the edge faces mode. Now let's apply a slice modifier to the pilaster group. Let's activate the slice plane by pressing shortcut 1 and let's rotate it 90 degrees around the z-axis like this. Now let's scroll down and remove positive. And as you can see, using the slice modifier, we will able to remove half of the pilaster in just seconds. Now let's exit the isolation mode by clicking on this icon here in the status bar. Now let's enable the edged faces mode by pressing shortcut F4 and let's mirror our pilaster to the other side. And to do so, let's select our pilaster and from the hierarchy panel, let's enable effect pivot only and let's adjust the position of the pilaster gizmo and snap it to the center of our reference guide like this. Now let's deactivate the gizmo and let's use the mirror tool by clicking on its icon here in the toolbar. And we are going to mirror our pilaster in the x-axis as an instance and press OK. And now we have mirrored our pilaster to the other side. And finally, let's create the cornice molding. This cornice molding, so let's zoom in using the zoom region tool. And as you can see, our cornice molding will consist of two parts, the top part and the bottom part. The top part will be the cornice element extended from the capital of the pilaster, and the bottom part which we will trace from the reference image. So let's create the top part. But first, let's zoom out and let's select the custom profile of the base element of the capital. Hold Shift and drag to make a copy. Press OK. Let's zoom in. Press 1 to enable the vertex editing mode. Select this vertex and snap it to this one. Select this group of vertices. Press delete to delete them. Now let's connect these two vertices together. So right click and enable the connect tool, and let's connect this vertex with this vertex like this to close the spline. Now we have finished creating the custom profile of the top part of the cornice molding. Now let's create the 2D shape for our cornice molding, but before doing so, let's enable the vertex editing mode and let's change the location of the first vertex from this corner to this corner. So let's select this vertex, right click and make first. Now let's create our 2D shape, which will be a line spline. So from the shapes tab, let's enable the line tool and let's create a line spline like this. Now let's enable the align tool and let's align it to the base element of the crown. We will align the center of our 2D shape with the center of the base element in the XYZ direction. Press OK. Now let's align it to the top of the base element. Now let's zoom out and let's enable the vertex editing mode by pressing shortcut 1, and let's extend our line spline from this side to that side like this. Now let's jump to the perspective view by pressing shortcut P, and let's align our line spline with the back of the base element. So with our line spline selected, let's snap it to the back of the base element like this. Back to the front view and let's apply the bevel profile modifier to our 2D shape. Under parameters, choose classic and let's pick our custom profile like this. Let's switch to the perspective view. As you can see, we still need to make some adjustment. Let's jump to the left view by pressing shortcut L, and let's rotate our object 90 degrees around the z-axis like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, let's change the color of the top part of our cornice molding to the yellow color. We have finished creating the top part of our cornice molding. Switch to the front view, and finally let's create the bottom part of our cornice molding. And as you can see, I have finished creating its custom profile by tracing it from our reference image, but we still need to make some adjustment to the top part. So let's select the custom profile of the top part and let's enable the wireframe mode by pressing shortcut F3, and let's enable the vertex editing mode by pressing shortcut 1. Now let's select this group of vertices and let's make it slightly wider like this. Now let's disable the wireframe mode and let's zoom out and let's exit the isolation mode. Now let's select the top part of our cornice molding and the custom profile of the bottom part. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them. Press L to switch to the left view. Now let's select the top part and let's shift and drag it to make a copy. Then let's snap it to the bottom of the top part. Now in the bevel profile, let's pick the custom profile of the bottom part. Now let's switch to perspective view and let's exit the isolation mode. And as you can see, now we have finished creating the top part and the bottom part of our cornice molding. And by doing so, we have finished creating our cornice molding. Now let's switch back to the front view. And finally, before wrapping up this part, as you can see, after we placed this pilaster on this side, parts of the panel molding of the dado got hidden. And to deal with this problem, first, let's close the dado group. Let's select the dado and the pilaster. Press Alt plus Q to isolate them. Now let's enable the wireframe mode by pressing shortcut F3. Let's use the zoom region tool to zoom in on this corner. Now let's select the dado group. From group, choose open. Now let's select the dado molding. Let's enable the vertex editing mode and let's snap this group of vertices to the boundary of the shaft like this. Now let's select this panel molding and select the rectangle layer. From the modifier panel, let's apply a new editable spline modifier to it. Now let's enable the vertex editing mode and let's select these two vertices and snap them to the border of the recessed area like this. Now let's zoom out and let's disable the wireframe mode, and as you can see, the problem of the panel molding is solved. Now let's exit the isolation mode. That's a wrap for part 5. If you enjoyed it, show some love by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means the world to me and keeps me inspired to create even more awesome content for you. Can't wait to see you in part 6 to finish modeling our segmented archid windows. Thanks for watching.